4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. I know that number because I counted it. Not obsessively, I'm not that kind of man. But when you spend enough quiet evenings in a house that used to have noise in it, you start to notice exactly how long the silence has been running. No call on Father's Day, not last year, not the year before, no text on my birthday, even though I still remembered his. I sent one to him every single year, never heard back. Not when my knee surgery kept me in bed for 2 weeks, not when the flooding took out the lower half of the workshop I'd spent 30 years building from nothing. I'd made peace with that absence the same way you make peace with a bad hip. You learn to walk around it, and you stop waiting for it to heal on its own. Then my phone lit up on a Thursday night at 11:53, and everything I'd told myself about being at peace turned out to be a polite lie I'd been telling myself so I could sleep. I didn't recognize the number at first, but I knew before I even opened the message. A father knows, even when he shouldn't. I read it standing at my kitchen counter in socks, under the one light I always leave on over the stove. Dad, saw your post about the lake house. We should meet. I'm going to need about $90,000. There's an investment opportunity I can't afford to miss. I'll be at Hartwell's Grille on Friday at noon. Come with a cashier's check. I set the phone face down on the counter. Then I picked it up and read it again. No, how are you? No, I've missed you. Not even a hope you're doing well, Dad. Just a number and a place and a time, like I was a vendor he needed to source from before the quarter closed. Welcome to Dad's harsh revenge. Pull up a chair. I'm going to take you somewhere with this one. If you've been around a while, you know how I tell a story, so hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I'll see you in the comments. My son's name is Ethan. He's 32 years old, and for the first 28 of those years, I thought I knew exactly who he was. Quiet kid, methodical, got his mother's patience, and I always like to think my work ethic. I taught him to wire a switch panel when he was 15, watched him calculate load capacity like it was second nature before he was old enough to drive. I figured he'd go into electrical contracting like me, or maybe engineering. Instead, he went to business school down in Atlanta, came back to Charlotte with big ideas about opening a restaurant, and did exactly that. I was proud of him for it. The trouble started with the divorce. Mine, not his. His mother and I split when Ethan was 29, 30 years of marriage, and she decided she'd had enough of being married to a man who loved his work more than his family. Maybe she was right. I don't know. What I do know is that once the papers were signed, something shifted in my son. Like he'd chosen a side without telling me, and that side wasn't mine. The calls got shorter, the visits stopped, and then gradually nothing. For 4 years and some months I rebuilt myself alone, sold the big house, bought a smaller place out near Lake Norman, paid it off completely last spring. 31 years of hard work and careful living finally clearing that last line on the mortgage statement. I posted a photo on my Facebook page, just me holding the paper, standing in front of the water. A quiet personal milestone, the kind of thing you share for yourself more than anyone else. That photo was what got his attention. I sat with his message for a long time that Thursday night, long enough for the ice in my glass to melt twice. Part of me, the part that never really closes the door on your own kid, no matter what he does, wanted to believe this was just awkward. Maybe the restaurant was in trouble and he was too proud to simply ask. Maybe he needed his dad and this was the only way he knew how to reach. People do that. They wrap the real need in something harder because the real thing feels too exposed. But $90,000 with a cashier's check by Friday noon. That wasn't a son reaching for his father, that was a transaction. I didn't text back that night. Couldn't sleep much either. I walked through the house the way you do when your mind won't settle. Slow loops from the kitchen to the back porch and back again like I was looking for something I'd misplaced. I stopped outside the door to the second bedroom. Storage room now, mostly, though I've got a shelf in there with a few things I kept from when Ethan was young, a Little League trophy from 2005, the year his team actually won something, a birthday card he made me in 4th grade out of construction paper, crayon letters slightly uneven across the top, the D written backwards the way kids write it when they're still working things out. I didn't open that door. I just stood there with my hand flat against the frame for a minute, then walked back to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee I didn't need at midnight. By Friday morning, I'd decided to go. Not because of the money, not even really because of hope, though I won't pretend hope had nothing to do with it. I went because the message mentioned a business partner, an investment opportunity, and that phrase sat wrong with me the way a bad connection sits wrong before the panel ever throws a spark. 31 years in electrical contracting taught me that. Smoke comes before the fire every single time, and I've learned to smell it early. Thursday afternoon, I sat down at my desk and started looking. His name was Spencer Howell, 38 years old. According to his own website, he was a boutique hospitality consultant and private equity facilitator based in Charlotte. There was a professional headshot, good suit, easy smile, the kind of face that photographs well at charity galas. The site listed 3 restaurant concepts he'd supposedly launched and 2 exclusive dining partnerships he'd managed for regional clients. I dug deeper. The first thing I found was a civil complaint filed in Mecklenburg County 2 years ago. A local catering company claiming Spencer had taken a $30,000 development fee for a project that never materialized. Settled quietly, terms sealed. I noted it and kept going. The second thing was a North Carolina Secretary of State filing. One of the LLCs listed on his website had been administratively dissolved, no annual report filed in 2 years. Another entity shared a registered agent address with 2 companies I'd never heard of. When I cross-referenced the names of the listed principals on those filings, not one of them showed up anywhere else online. No LinkedIn, no state contractor license, no state bar registration, nothing. I've been in business long enough to know that real partners leave paper trails. These were ghosts wearing suits and stock photos. By Thursday evening, I'd pulled up a Better Business Bureau file showing 3 unresolved complaints against Spencer Howell personally, all within the last 18 months, all following the same pattern. A small business owner pays an upfront consulting fee. The promised services either don't appear or fall dramatically short of what was described. Spencer becomes increasingly difficult to reach. The complainant eventually gives up. Ranged from $12,000 to $45,000 per incident. I printed every page, stacked them in a manila folder, the same kind I used to use for job site permits and inspection reports back when the company was running at full strength. Then I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd read the text 3 nights before, and I looked at that folder for a long time. The $90,000 wasn't an investment, it was a rescue line. And my son either didn't know that or didn't want to know it, which in some ways was worse. I thought about calling him that night, but I knew Ethan. Knew him better than he'd given me credit for across 4 years of silence. He had his mother's stubbornness in his bones, and he'd never heard uncomfortable news well from a distance. He needed to see it. He needed it in his hands. So I waited until Friday. I drove to Hartwell's Grille that morning in the same truck I've had for 11 years, a 2013 F-150 with nearly 140,000 miles on it and a dent in the rear panel I keep meaning to fix. I could have driven something newer. I own 2 vehicles, but I wasn't going there to impress anyone. I was going because my son had reached out, even if the reason was wrong, and some part of me hadn't stopped being his father just because he'd stopped calling. I got there 10 minutes early, took a booth near the window. I saw Ethan come through the front door at 3 minutes past noon. He looked older than the last photo I had of him, a Christmas picture his aunt had forwarded me 4 years ago. Shorter hair, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was wearing a jacket that looked like it cost more than my first month's rent in 1988. He wasn't alone. Spencer Howell looked exactly like his headshot, sharp suit. An easy smile that arrived a half second before genuine warmth would have if genuine warmth were what it was. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder as they walked in. The kind of contact that looks familiar but isn't. The practiced warmth of a man who touches people to establish something rather than express it. They sat across from me. Ethan said, "Hey, Dad," in a tone that had less feeling than most business emails I receive. Spencer said, "Great to finally put a face to the name, Roland," like we'd been in correspondence for months. The first 10 minutes were exactly what you'd expect. Spencer did most of the talking. He described the opportunity, a multi-location restaurant expansion, a private equity fund structure, a projected return that made every instinct I've ever developed in 30 years of running a business pull back hard. He spoke about Ethan the way a handler speaks about an asset. He spoke about me like I was an investor he needed to close before a deadline he mentioned 3 times in 5 minutes. Ethan said almost nothing. He nodded when prompted. He sipped his water. When he looked at me, it was never for more than a moment, and when he did, there was something in his face I recognized from when he was 17, and had done something he knew was wrong but wasn't ready to own. After the pitch wound down, Spencer slid a document packet across the table. "Agreement's straightforward," he said. "Wire funds by end of business Monday and you're in at the ground level. Ethan's position gets secured, and you both benefit when we scale." I didn't touch the papers. I looked past Spencer entirely and spoke directly to my son. "Ethan," I said, "I need Spencer to step away from the table for a few minutes. Just you and me. There's something in this folder I need to show you privately." Spencer didn't move. He settled back in his chair with the comfortable confidence of a man who'd done this before and knew how it usually ended. "Roland," he said, "anything you want to say, you can say in front of Ethan's partner." I kept my eyes on my son. "Ethan, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking as your father." Something moved across Ethan's face, guilt maybe, or the last wall he had going up. He looked at Spencer. Spencer gave a small, nearly invisible shake of his head. "Dad." My son's voice had an edge I hadn't heard before, something hard and embarrassed wound together. "Whatever you want to say it here. We're not doing some side conversation." I held his eyes for a long moment. Then I opened the folder and laid the pages out between us, one at a time: the civil complaint, the dissolved LLC, the BB filings, the list of company principals who existed only in state incorporation documents and nowhere else on earth. "I know the restaurant's in trouble," I said, keeping my voice level. "I know you need help. And I came here today because you're my son and you asked me to come. But this man is not going to save your business. He's going to take whatever you give him, the same way he's taken money from at least 3 other business owners in this county in the last year and a half. It's all right there in front of you." The table went very quiet. Spencer's smile didn't disappear exactly. It just stopped reaching his eyes. He picked up one of the pages, studied it for a moment with the careful calm of a man calculating his options, and set it back down. Ethan didn't touch any of it. He looked at me. "Dad," he said finally, quietly, "you always have to do this." I didn't raise my voice. Haven't raised it in a moment like this since I was 35 years old, and learned the hard way that the louder you get, the less anyone hears you. "I came here to give you the truth," I said. "What you do with it is your choice. But I won't be signing anything, and I won't be sending $1. Not because I don't love you. Because I do." I stood up, buttoned my jacket, left a 20 on the table for the coffee neither of us had touched much. "The folder stays," I said. "Read it when you're ready." I walked out into the Charlotte afternoon without looking back. The drive home was quiet. I kept the radio off, took the long way around the lake, partly because I needed the time, partly because there's something about that stretch of road in the fall light that reminds me the world is larger than whatever is sitting on my chest. I didn't hear from Ethan that evening, not Saturday either. I kept myself busy the way I always have. Fixed the porch step that had been creaking since March, called my sister up in Asheville, made a pot of chili I ate slowly over 2 days. On Sunday morning, I read the paper at my kitchen table the way I've done for 30-something years, coffee still hot, morning still quiet. Monday, I was in the workshop radio on low local AM station. The report came in between the weather update and a commercial. The name stopped me like a thrown breaker. Spencer Howell, Charlotte area financial consultant, taken into federal custody Monday morning on wire fraud charges related to an alleged investment scheme targeting small business owners across Mecklenburg and Union counties. Prosecutors alleged that over a period of 3 years, Howell had collected approximately $1.2 million in development fees and equity facilitation payments from at least 14 victims. A federal magistrate had issued an asset freeze on his accounts the previous Friday afternoon. The same Friday, he'd been sitting across a restaurant table from me, sliding papers around like a man with all the time in the world. I turned off the radio and stood in the middle of the workshop without moving for a full minute. I wasn't surprised. When you've spent enough years tracing faults in systems, you develop a feel for exactly when something is about to fail. The only question is whether you reach the people in time. I didn't know if Ethan had read the folder. I didn't know if he'd already sent money before that Friday lunch, money that might be frozen in a federal account right now, money that might never come back. But I knew what was coming next. I knew it the same way. I knew the storm front moving down from the mountains that afternoon was going to make the lake look like hammered tin by evening. I went inside, made coffee, sat in the same chair I'd been sitting in for 4 years of quiet evenings, and I waited. He called Tuesday afternoon, not a text, an actual call which told me more than the first word he said. His voice was different. The hard edge from the restaurant was gone. What was underneath it was younger somehow, stripped back to something closer to the kid who used to come find me in the garage on Saturday mornings because he didn't want to sit alone in the house. "Dad," he said, "I need to talk to you." "I know," I said. "Come over." He was at my door by 6 o'clock. He looked the way people look when something they'd staked 2 years on gets dismantled in 48 hours on a news cycle. Pale, tired in a way that sleep alone wasn't going to fix, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, which shouldn't have been remarkable, except that I hadn't seen him dressed like a regular person in so long I'd almost forgotten he owned clothes like that. He'd lost money. Not the $90,000. He hadn't been able to pull that together in time. which was luck more than wisdom, and I think somewhere in him he understood that. But he'd paid Spencer a $30,000 consulting retainer 11 months ago to get the partnership started. That money was gone, likely gone for good. He told me all of this standing just inside the front door, before I'd even offered him a seat, like he needed to get it said before his nerve broke. I let him finish, then I pointed at the kitchen table. We sat down, I poured 2 cups, same table, same chairs, same kitchen where I'd stood on a Thursday night just over a week ago and read a text that had cost me 2 weeks of sleep. I read the folder, he said, at the restaurant after you left. Okay, I said. I already knew something was off. I think I'd known for a while. He looked at his hands around the mug. I just didn't want to be wrong about it. I'd already committed to it in my head, you know? And being wrong about it meant... He stopped. It meant you'd made a bad call, I said. Yeah. I understood that more than he knew. I'd spent 4 years not picking up the phone because picking it up meant admitting I'd made some bad calls of my own. You could have called me, I said. Any time in the last 4 years, you know that. He was quiet for a long moment. I know, he said. I know, Dad. There's a version of this conversation where I made him earn every word, where I let him sit in the discomfort of what 4 years of silence actually cost, not just financially, but in the real currency that fathers and sons spend and can't get back. That version lived somewhere in the back of my chest, real enough that I felt it. I'm human. I'm 63 years old, and my son went 4 years without calling me, and then the first time he did, it came with a dollar amount and a deadline. That's real. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But I know what my job is. My job isn't to be right. My job is to be a father. I'll help you, I said. I'll look at the restaurant books with you. I'll help you work out what's actually salvageable and what the real path forward looks like. But I need you to understand something first. He looked up. I'm not an emergency fund. I'm not a number you call when everything else has run out. I kept my voice the same way I kept it in the workshop when something had gone wrong and someone needed to hear the truth without flinching. I'm your father. If you want me in your life, I'm there as your father. That's the only version I have left to offer. His jaw tightened. I could see him working through it. The pride, the defensiveness, the habit of the wall he'd spent 4 years building one brick at a time. Then he let out a long, slow breath. Okay, he said. Just that word, but the way he said it was different from anything else in the conversation. Quitter, like something had been set down that had been heavy for longer than either of us was going to say out loud. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About the restaurant, about the years between us, about the divorce and the story he'd constructed around it, and how that story had made me into someone I didn't recognize. He did most of the talking. I listened the way I've always listened best, without filling the silences before they were ready. By the time he left, nothing was fixed. I want to be straight about that, because it would be dishonest to tell you that 2 hours at a kitchen table undoes 4 years of distance. It doesn't. That's not how people work, and we're not the kind of family that pretends otherwise. There were things between us that were going to need time, and probably more than 2 cups of coffee's worth of honesty before they were fully worked through. But something had shifted, the kind of shift that's small enough you might almost miss it, except you've been waiting 4 years for it, and you know exactly what it looks like when the circuit finally closes. He texted me the next morning, "Just thanks for coffee, Dad, and for the folder." I read it at my kitchen table in the early morning light coming off the lake, low and gold and unhurried, the way fall light is out here. I wrote back, "Any time, son." I meant that in every direction it can be meant. I don't know exactly what comes next. Ethan's got a hard road ahead of him. The restaurant needs serious work, $30,000 is gone and probably won't be recovered, and the federal case against Spencer Howell will drag through the courts for the better part of 2 years before it's resolved. My son is going to have to rebuild something real this time, something that belongs to him instead of to a man in a good suit with a manufactured smile. I'll help where I can in the ways a father can, but I can't do the work for him. Nobody can do that for another person. Maybe especially not a father. What I know is this. I spent 4 years in a house that got quieter every year, and I made peace with it the way you make peace with things you can't change by yourself. Then a text message cracked that peace right down the center. And I drove to a restaurant in my 11-year-old truck with a manila folder full of evidence and the stubborn, irrational, indestructible thing that makes a father keep showing up even when he has every reason not to. I left both of them on the table. He picked up the folder. Some days that's enough. The rest is something we'll have to build back over time, both of us, one conversation at a time with no cashier's check required. If this story reached you somewhere real, drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from. Hit that like button on your way out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come on in. I'll see you in the next one.